Good afternoon, good morning. LinkedIn super special edition of Let's Build today. My buddy George B. Thomas has been working on, something I think is super special, anyways, related to the human beings that we work with every day. How you doing, man?
Brother, I am doing great. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you today. It's really it was funny. I was actually thinking about the conversation we're going to have today, and I realized that it's two major roads in my life that I've been focused on, and today they're merging into one super highway. And so I'm excited to, help as many humans as possible, and I think that's even going to be at an organizational level and a culture level as we kind of have this conversation today.
Oh man, I'm excited because those two things, those organizational and culture and just interpersonal dynamics inside of companies. I mean, change management is such a is such a like landmine because we don't ever talk about this side of things. And when I hear leaders saying that they don't like, there's no plans, there's no maybe they haven't heard of the phrase change management before. That literally happened last year. It's like, whoa, where are we at? How did we get here? And why aren't more people talking about it? So just to kind of set it up, you've created this superhuman, framework, which on the surface, like you kind of got two brands going, Beyond the Default and Sidekick Strategies, but seeing them converge, and when you told me about all the plans that you had, it's like, man, this is both sides of this coin. And when we talk about trying to help admins, as just one example, do a better job with HubSpot, so much of it is coaching people on how to interact with human beings that they want to be using the platform, that they want to change their habits. So I love it, man. I'm so happy somebody like you is working on this and bringing this into the world.
Yeah, my brain works in a weird way. And Chris, just for those who are watching this live or watching the recording, I think it's good to kind of set a foundation of for the last 10 to 12 years, I've been helping humans with HubSpot. And everything that we help from a HubSpot or inbound level is kind of predicated on like you're coming from a good place, you're acting as a good actor or a good human. And there was this time frame where I realized like not everybody knows exactly what that means. Not everybody knows exactly how to build themselves into that. And so I went from this mindset of I just want to help humans with HubSpot to, yeah, I want to help humans with HubSpot, but I also want to just help humans be better humans. And so out of that was born the secondary brand of Beyond Your Default and the Beyond Your Default podcast. And what's crazy is as we were doing episodes of the Beyond Your Default podcast, I was talking to the co-host Liz Moorhead, and I was like, look, listen, when I was helping people with HubSpot and doing a bunch of video tutorials when I worked at the Sales Lion and when I worked at Impulse Creative, I would always end my videos with don't forget to be a happy, helpful, humble human. And I'm like, wouldn't it be great if I could build a framework? Because, and I say this in all humility, one of the questions that I would get is how do we get more Georges in our organization? Again, humbly, I say that. And so I was like, well, what makes me me? What could I talk or teach that could end up being a framework that any individual human could leverage and move forward with? And so we literally built out the Superhuman framework. It's 10 H's. I'm sure we'll dig into that as we go. But then what's fun about today's conversation is once we got this built out, we realized, oh, snap. This is not just a personal growth framework that should live only in Beyond Your Default, the community, where there's actually, we built a course around this actual framework so people can dive in. But it's something that should be taken to businesses, leaders. And so it's like, it's all about the humans. So let's think about this in a personal level, a professional level. Yes, let's help people who happen to use HubSpot that are humans, but more importantly, let's just help the humans. And that's where we're at with this, buddy.
Yeah. And I'd love it, like, because even what you said about like the way you end, happy, helpful, humble.
Yeah,
Uh, like these are like kind of meaning of life type questions. And I love, like, I love talking about the philosophical stuff because this is, if we don't help people, you know, that may not know how to do any of those things. Like, so when you hear that, when you say that, it's like it could, you could easily feel somebody on the other side. Well, like, how do I think, I'm humble, but what, like, am I?
what does that
Like, I
mean?
know I could
Yeah,
be, I feel like I could be happier. Like, there's so many different definitions of that depending on who you talk to. And, helpful. What
yeah,
does that look like in a fully digital, world? And just helping even the tried and true, like, field sales guys out there understanding, like, here's, like, they literally have questions. Like, I might be the most helpful dude in person, but I
right.
have no idea how to do it on LinkedIn or online or in this other place that I'm used to, and kind of approaching it with that understanding, like, is the first step, right?
Yeah. Yeah. What is was it GI Joe is like now you know and knowing's half the battle. Like
Yes.
that's the thing, understanding that there are these elements that you could pay attention to and then understanding what these elements mean to your life. And almost giving you like I imagine this dashboard of 10 gauges, right? The holistic gauge, the happiness gauge, the hungry slash healthy hustle gauge, the helpfulness gauge, the humor gauge, the humility gauge, the honesty gauge, the health gauge, the humanity gauge, and the holiness gauge. Like these 10 gauges that you can now look at because I mean, if you can measure it, it makes sense, right? That's a good marketer right there. Like, I got to have a dashboard, I got to be able to measure it. But being able to look at those gauges and be like, oh, ooh, that one's kind of towards the empty side of the gauge. Like, how do I fill that up? How do I get all of them to, where I would expect myself to be as an individual human, employee, as a leader or owner of a business, or even imagine this 10 gauges as an organization and being like, where is our organization weak based on this 10H superhuman framework? Now, all of a sudden, you have a roadmap, you have a framework, you have things that you can pay attention to because you fully understand what they mean for you and your organization.
So if we know, maybe I'm putting you on the spot here. Like, if we know, there's definitely no, yeah, everybody knows that there is a huge self-help industry and lots of authors and lots of frameworks out there. What is missing, in your opinion, for you to go the lengths of, creating, one of your own?
Yeah. It's funny because I've asked myself this question, and to be honest with you, my wife has even asked me this question, like, who are you to? And I've asked myself, who am I to? One of the things that I've learned along the way of helping humans with HubSpot is I'm really good at simplifying the complex. And so taking these, and it's funny because you alluded to it at the beginning of this recording, Chris. You said these are like change your life cards. Like these aren't easy questions, right? So my thing is I'm gonna take these 10 areas that historically have been confusing, and I'm gonna simplify the complex and build out a way that people understand what it is, but also have the ability to modify my understanding, my teaching of what they are to how it fits into their life. So there's a level of simplifying the complex. There's a level that I'm always paying attention to of making it flexible so it can be tweaked for the organization, tweaked for the individual human. And the other part of this, by the way, goes back to something that I have a strong belief in for years. Chris, I'll do this. And actually, two things are popping to mind. The reason I'll do this is for two major reasons. One, I'm a firm believer when it comes to content creation. of having your own version of the thing that you want to have a conversation around or people have questions about. So, sure, could I say, hey, go read the book Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty? Go, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks? Go, like Soar by TDJ. Like, I could do that, but why would I not create my own version based on the experiences and lessons that I've learned over my lifetime of almost dying 3 times, being in the military, being a high school dropout, at 3 years old, living in a 1 room log cabin, riding my pony to a 1 room schoolhouse. Like, I have this knowledge and this mentorship of like 52, almost 53 years that I'm like, I got to do something with this. And this leads me to another piece of this is I don't want to get to my grave and go, oh, there was a lot of potential there. There was a lot of ways that I could have helped future humans on the planet, but Jay wrote a book, Gay wrote a book, TD Jakes wrote a book, right? And so all of this is out of like, I don't care if there's a million other books because there's 1,000 or 10,000 other people who are going to connect with the way that I say it, the way that I write it, the way that we create it. And that's just a firm believing of content in general. Is like you will have the tribe that wants to circle themselves around the way that you teach, preach, or present the content that you're doing. The other thing that I'll say here, especially around this conversation, is just it is coming from a place of servanthood, and dare I use the word calling. Like there's just something in my gut that will tell me. And by the way, I've followed this my entire career. 2012, learned about HubSpot. There's something here. Maybe I should pull this thread. Podcasting in 2013, videos in 2014, AI in right. Like I have this mentality or this ability to be a transition specialist or to be able to pivot. And so I got to this point where I was like, boop, pivot, or in this case, split, continue to do this thing you've been doing, but also start to show up in this way. So hopefully that answers your question in a way that makes sense to you and to the people who are viewing this.
Yeah, no, that's definitely helpful. And I think that's where, we get to the point of like everybody has a story to tell and everybody can add value like just by sharing experiences and just because it exists already. Because at the same time, all that stuff exists, but we keep running into the same problems and challenges inside of organizations where people are not happy, they are not helpful, they are not humble. And like that's where we get to that level of like, I love digging in with you and just digging in general, like why? Like
Yeah.
why are we still here? And that's where any level of, repurposing or slightly different direction or, even like it or not, the fact that it comes to like the identity, like how we identify as individuals. And if I am somebody that identifies with the HubSpot ecosystem, just the fact that I know you're also in the HubSpot ecosystem, I'm probably just more open to at least checking out your framework instead of like, one of these other, people out there
Yeah.
providing, similar advice. So I think that has a ton to do with it. And that's why like we are so far away from oversaturation when it comes to just, you know, helping other humans out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm very passionate about the humans, as you know, from like the podcasts that we do with even I mean, the fact that on the Hub Heroes podcast, we have a thing where it's humans, right? And the fact that we create another podcast Beyond Your Default, and it's literally about like the micro ways in which humans can be better. Like again, it's for me, it's all about the humans and the humanity or humanness of it all. And when I say that humanity or humanness of it, what I'm talking about is like the positive, the good. Yeah, it's funny, Chris, because my brain goes to my wife and I years and years and years ago used to jokingly say, I wish there was a good news channel, a news channel that just talked about good news, because there's so much negativity that's thrown out there. There's so much stress that's put out there. There's no wonder like we have a culture, riddled with anxiety. So Beyond Your Default is my good news channel. Beyond my your default is like the place where you can go and feel safe. You can feel secure. You can focus on your growth. You can almost lean inward so that you can empower the inward to then be that light, or whatever analogy you want to use, to the rest of the world, to the rest of your organization, to your family. And we're so busy that sometimes I think we lose sight of that inward power, like the plugging in and filling up to be able to give out. That's just a big missing piece.
Yeah, yeah, and focusing on just progress, and like I used to tell that to my teams all the time. Like no matter what kind of challenges we would have in an organization, like as long as we could point to some progress every day, you know, which might
Yes.
even just be like taking a step back and breathing and saying, okay, now we've at least learned from this challenge that was just presented. Maybe we didn't get anything done, but we progressed our knowledge sets, taking it to that level. And you just reminded me of a TED talk. Forgot who it was, but a TED talk I've seen recently that was like, looking back on the years since 2020, it was all about here's all the amazing things that have happened in that time that you probably had no idea happened
Yeah.
because we've been so focused on, crisis reporting basically.
Yeah, it's funny, Chris, too, because when I hear you talking, I personally have this saying that I'm very invested in, but it flows through the Sidekick Strategy team and it flows through the Beyond Your Default team, and that's that we're focused on 1% better each and every day. 1%. I don't care if it's 10%, great. 20, 50, whatever. But 1% better each and every day. That's the only thing we ask, that you're giving your best, and we increase something in a better way 1%. The other side of this though is we are very reflective, right? So on my whiteboard, literally over here off camera, I have a section that says you've come a long way since 2013. 2013, bro. That's what it says, right? And because it's the 1% better each and every day, but now take a moment, find the base of a tree, and look at the mountain that you've climbed, the person that you are versus were. Because it's only when we look back and see how far we've come that we can have the passion and the belief that we can make it to the top or make it the rest of the way. I believe actually, I don't ever want to reach a top. I just want to keep traveling up, right? So that's something that I try to lean into. Like, listen, ladies and gentlemen, do your best and try to do 1% better each and every day.
So with that, like, how are you, uh, planning to get this message out? How are you delivering that in a way that people will, you know, maybe find some success of their own and some progress of their own, or
Yeah.
get 1% better themselves?
So there's a couple different ways. One, if I think of the personal side of it, we have the Beyond Your Default community.beyondyourdefault.com. This is not a sales pitch. I'm just answering the question that Chris asked me. And we literally have built out a Superhuman framework course, which ties like podcast episodes, additional information, resources, all in, again, these 10H framework. And so it allows you to dive in, and there's a lot of reflective questions. There's a lot of like thinking ahead. Like, so there's a course there for personal growth. Now, what I'll share with you, Chris, which is interesting, is that when you asked me to talk about this, I was like, wait a minute, dude, that's that's you're doing stuff on the HubSpot road. Why are you asking me to come and create something on the personal growth beyond your default side of things? Like, why are you trying to collide these two planets? And at first I was a little uneasy. I even told a client this morning, I said, I might be nervous. I'm not sure. Like, I know it's energy. But this is, for me, this is two roads colliding. And so, Chris, on the business side of it, what's real interesting when I started to unpack my brain on paper around the superhuman framework for organizations and leaders, I started to come up with some main points that were what I think would be impactful to any organization. So, my brain goes to like both personal and professional growth. Like, how does the framework impact that? My brain goes to company culture. How does the framework, what elements of the framework could be leveraged for company culture? I start to look at collaboration and support. I start to look at building trust and integrity. I start to look at purpose and meaning of organizations, and what pieces of these superhuman framework fall into these sections. How if a leadership team would embrace the superhuman framework, how would that impact them? Therefore, the trickle down effect impact the employees, impact the revenue, impact the strategy. And one that I'm super passionate about is how does this superhuman framework actually lean into or help organizations deliver a human centric internal business strategy that then equates to an external human centric strategy. And all of this is kind of wrapped or a baseline foundation of how are we helping organizations create a supportive environment versus toxic waste dumps that are focused on the right things versus, yes, there are necessary things. And I'm not saying they're wrong, but there are some right things that could be elevated above the things that have to be measured. And so all of a sudden, when I started to wrap my brain around this and how the framework fit into that, I was like, oh my God, this needs to be an article. Oh my God, this probably needs to be like a culture deck for us as an organization. Oh my God, could we create a culture deck template that people could take the framework and customize it to their organization? And then I had the big uh-oh moment where I'm like, oh snap. Am I looking at like a business book that needs to be written based on the superhuman framework? And so, first of all, Chris, thanks because you made these freaking two planets collide. And my brain was like, how was I blind to this until Chris asked me to do something that made me uncomfortable? And now it's like I have the blinders off of how powerful, not only from a personal development standpoint, the superhuman framework is, but from a personal and professional standpoint, and how far this actually could go.
Glad I could help.
Me too,
Uh,
brother. To be honest with you, I was like, this is some exciting stuff. Like, if you could see the Slack messages that I was sending over to Liz, the content strategist, and the document that I sent over, and like, look, there's some juicy stuff in here. Like, there's some things that the world needs to know. Like, this is Plato. Like, how do we make this even better? Like, I was brain dumping for several hours today around like this thinking that I was putting into preparing the conversation that we were going to have today.
yeah, and that like people might like this whole idea of like this is a HubSpot centric channel, and what kind of topics like. And as we're working on these various things together, it's like trying to like the last label that you literally can't remove and you must start with is human, right?
Yep.
So my approach to a lot of this, and I've learned a lot, like just being, in this ecosystem as a partner for the last year, in terms of moving from, we have uh, the consultants of the world that think everything has to be customized and like every business is different because they have a different process. But it's basically this boundary. The only boundary that makes sense to me is like machine, like our human, right? In that, honestly, since we're trying to serve humans and we talk about customer experience, all customers want the same things, right? They want to be heard, they want to be understood, and they want their expectations met throughout the entire journey, the entire relationship with your business.
Yep.
And no business is different in needing to serve that. So when we talk about processes, I got to the place of like, okay, Marcus is right when you talk about they ask you answer. Every business has to engage in this way. So like is really so every business isn't really different. But
Mm.
now as I'm working with each business, get to the point where they are strictly because there are different humans involved,
Yep.
right? And they're in charge of different things. They have different things going on in their lives. So, this idea that we can separate, personal and professional, and like, of course, we want to build balances, but like, people ask me why I'm spending time at various times of the day working on this stuff. Like, I love creating content, I love helping people. So, I'm not just gonna like decide to not do it because I'm
Yep.
not allowed to do it on a Saturday or
Yeah.
something like that because
Who
it's
said? Who made the
right.
rules? Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where like we're all human beings in that way, and people shift between like personal and professional, but like understanding that it's the same planet, like it's not two planets colliding, it's the same planet, it's the same people involved, we're all human beings, like, and we most of our brains work very similarly. And this is why it's challenging at the end of the day. Like we want it to be like the ones and zeros that we have on the production side of things or the robots or the AI, and we're just not. We're just not. Like, so how do we embrace that and serve that better?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, my buddy Mark Schaefer, he said in a book, but also I remember being there at Social Media Marketing World from stage. He basically ended his keynote with the most human businesses win. So if you take that statement and you backtrack from that, well, then you have to start asking yourself some questions like, how do we create the most human business? Well, by having the most human humans. So, how do we enable humans to actually be the great humans that we want? And again, it you said you alluded to some things of like, well, how do we make sure that our employees feel seen? How do we make sure that our employees or our humans are heard? How do we create a holistic environment for our humans? There are so many things that we can start to do from just a strategic standpoint of like, if you're listening to this, and yes, you have a team, you're using HubSpot, but do you have things in place of like, does your team know where to go if they need help with like mental issues, mental health issues? Does your organization provide some type of gym or gym membership or being able to buy, a walking treadmill? Like, do you give money towards that because you're focused on the mental and physical health? Um, how how much are you giving and enabling the humans so that they can serve but also be like excited and engaged and like one of the things that I think for me is a man, I can sleep good at night almost every night is when you have a human, an employee that says, "This is the best place I've ever worked." Right? They look at you and they're like, "Oh, I'll make sure that gets done by tomorrow." And by the way, you know that it's 5 o'clock at night, and you're thinking to yourself, "Well, you don't have to do that," but you know that they're just like so vested. No, 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 it's cool. But at the same time, that's because I can go, "Oh, do you need a half day off Friday? Take it," because I know like hashtag family first. Which, by the way, is another rule for us at Sidekick Strategy. Hashtag family first. If you hit me in a Slack channel and ish is hitting the fan, work doesn't exist. Go handle your business. We'll be here when you get back. Like that's just so there's like these fundamental things that start to be put in place or start to happen mentally based on I have these 10 things that I'm paying attention to and therefore I can understand what the outcomes and inputs should be based on those 10 things as I move forward.
I love it. I love it. And like there again, I think even if you've seen all the other stuff available or you've even found one that you like, just a different angle here. Because I think a lot of what you're bringing is just combining, like bridging the professional and personal in a way that others likely don't. And just helping people, like hopefully that, and the reason that we want to create content and at scale, and just we all need to start sharing knowledge just at a different level and a different cadence than we're used to, is like what came to mind is sometimes leaders mean well and they understand the importance of this, but they just tweak. You just got to tweak the goal a little bit. And when you said best place to work, right? The goal stated that I've heard come up is I want to be on the best place to work list. So then we work back from that and we're like, okay, we got to put a survey in place. Let's put some incentives over here so that people will give feedback instead of, and this is why I love the HubSpot ecosystem because I think it works similarly, and I'll share why. But like instead of let's make a place that everybody loves working at so that we will naturally get on lists like this,
Yeah.
right? It's just such a different shift. And that's how, like, as I entered the HubSpot ecosystem in 2017, the whole idea of I'm selling you software, which is the primary goal, because that, and it's in your best interest because the software will help you grow and be successful, versus I want to help you grow. And yes, probably that means you might buy some software or buy some services, but if I help you grow, if I do whatever it takes to give you that value, the value is going to come back in some way. But that value first, like let's help businesses grow, let's help customers grow, and then the rest will take care of itself. It just means so much to just the way that we look at things and we approach like the whole system.
Yeah. You're leaning into a couple things that I think will be helpful. One, I hate lists. And more than hating lists, I hate lists that people hack themselves into because they're absolute bullcrap. I like the serendipity of showing up on a list because you weren't focused on the list. And where I go with this is there's this whole other concept that we're eventually going to tie it into the superhuman framework, but we're working on them independently. Is I have this thing called the mathematics of one. And we talk about like if it was one person, if it was five people, if it was 5,000 people, it doesn't matter. We're always going to focus on the mathematics of one. We're going to bring the value. And where this came from is I heard my buddy, he was talking about he went to speak at an event and it was supposed to be packed. His room was supposed to be packed. 5 people showed up. And so he looked at him and he said, y'all want to go get some coffee? And these 5 people walked with this author, professional speaker to a coffee shop. And they sat and had a conversation for like 45 minutes to an hour that was probably triple the value that they would have maybe gotten if he was speaking from the stage and doing like his regular presentation because it was more intimate. And when I heard him tell this story, I go, oh my God, that's the power of the mathematics of one. Too many organizations, just like hacking lists, are out there trying to go viral instead of trying to go value. And when you think about the superhuman framework and being human, being happy, but more importantly, being helpful, that servanthood, and that servanthood of creating value to the world, one human at a time. Now, all of a sudden, you're coming from a totally different space, but it's the space that will end up being victorious. And the reason I can say that is because I'm living and breathing proof that for 10 years, I gave value to a community. And out of that, have been able to start Sidekick Strategies, George B. Thomas LLC, and Beyond Your Default. If there wouldn't have been the servanthood, the value, the brand build, the trust, the reciprocity, Chris, I wouldn't be making content with you today because nobody would give two issues about who I was on the planet. And here's the thing, lists, you're focused on success. Viral, you're focused on success. Superhuman framework, we're focused on significance. We're focused on legacy. That's where you want to focus as businesses, as organizations, as leaders, as individual humans trying to move the needles that people need you to move.
Man, hard not to get chills. Uh, that reminds me of, I think, Seth Godin's latest book, The Song of Significance. Super impactful listen, highly recommend. And that's what it comes down to. Do you want to just add noise or do you want to matter? And most people
Mm,
will want to matter in some way. They just need a little help understanding what that looks like, for them. And as you describe, I feel like I'm in the same boat where until, March 18th, like if I was looking for immediate, either revenue value or some kind of validation that a bunch of people were showing up every day for the live, if I didn't approach it from the perspective of I'm helping one person from this content, like there would be no shot. Like I wouldn't be here right now either, right? And
yep.
literally just
Yep.
showing up every day to add that value has done a lot, both I think to help people out there, but also to help me understand like what is it that I enjoy doing on a daily basis that I can really build, a career around, a life around, like to that I can continue enjoying doing it and continue, you know, helping people in the way that they're telling me that they're being helped. Like, because that's the worst part of being inside of businesses when you, oh man, like when I was let go twice in 10 months, my immediate reactions were like, well, shit, I was just in the process of helping, all of these
Yep.
people in the customer front lines, and now I can't help them. That sucks. Like, and we just find these ways to kind of like, rationalize our way out of value. Um, just we got to stop doing that. Nobody
Yeah.
wins.
It's so crazy. And Chris, there's a couple things that um and again, we're at the very precipice of superhuman framework. What does that mean from a professional side of things? But my brain goes to a couple things that I want to kind of, as we close here, I want to make sure that I pinpoint that. Listen, when personal growth is integrated with professional development, employees, humans become more balanced, fulfilled, and motivated. And when employees are genuinely interested in, by the way, you leaned to like, if I'm excited about it, if they're genuinely interested in each other's well-being as well as the work they're doing, um, success happens. This is actually when you can get to that, this is where the magic happens. And so for me, when I think about big picture, superhuman framework, personal and professional, it's about creating an environment or environments where everyone, every human can be their best selves, both in and out of the office.
Yes. No, that's well said. I just want to highlight one thing before we wrap. Like, if you're a leader and this just popped into my head, but you're thinking, oh, superhuman framework, like, I'm not trying to, build a company of superhumans. Like, bullshit. Like, if you've seen some of these job descriptions where it's like marketing coordinator and in charge of website, social, HubSpot, like all the things, and they just get all the hats. You're
Yep.
asking your people to be superhumans already, right? Like, go ahead and help them do that because they are capable of all that. But all we're asking is give them the resources, give them the support that they need, that it's your responsibility as a leader to follow up all those requests with the resources that your organization needs. And that
Yeah.
includes the knowledge that they need. In this case, if you could help somebody become superhuman, like I'm taking that, I'll take that opportunity every time.
Yeah. It's funny because my brain immediately went back to the other question that you asked almost at the beginning of this of like, why you? And I'm like, when you said that, I'm like, well, if I can, why wouldn't I? If I can, why wouldn't I? And guess what? I can. And so I'm going to.
Well, the world and universe are better off for it. And on behalf of as many people as I can, thank you for bringing this to bear and putting yourself out there. And it's gonna be fun to watch, man.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. And Chris, as always, thanks for having me. And I'm excited about this journey to see what happens.
Awesome. And if you're watching or listening to this, as you think about, maybe just what superhuman might mean to you, how you define that for yourself, whether it's happy, helpful, or humble, find some opportunities. They're there. Those opportunities are there. You just got to look for them, give yourself a chance to find them, and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.